Good day, everyone. Dear friends and colleagues, I am happy to welcome you to this episode of the Organ House Concert and Seminar Series. I am Temitope Obalade, your host for today, and I am delighted to have you join us today. You're welcome. The Organ House Concert and Seminar Series is an interdisciplinary research initiative that provides creative and intellectual spaces for scholars, performers, composers, educators, and professionals. Through rigorous engagement, the series champions an academic, artistic, and creative research agenda that is rooted in local realities while maintaining global relevance. The organelle's research agenda is premised on promoting innovative and critical approaches to research in music composition, performance, and the exploration or documentation of Nigeria and Africa's musical and cultural heritages. We invite all scholars, students, and colleagues, both across Africa and the global space, to explore our digital scholarly resources. Our YouTube page serves as our open access digital archive, featuring a curated collection of our works. We encourage you to follow, subscribe, and engage with the content there, as it is specifically designed to be a beneficial resource for your research and study. We're also on Facebook at the Organ House Concert and Seminar Series, on Instagram at Organ House Music, on X, formerly known as Twitter, as Organ House Music. Before we dive into what promises to be a highly engaging moment today, I have a few key announcements I would like to share with you. Today's concert and seminar series will be the last one for the year. We'll be going on a break from next week and we'll resume on the 8th of January with our reading session. As we go on a short break, we resume by God's grace in January 2026. We would have our first meeting of the year, which will be a dedicated reading session, where we'll focus on chapters 2 and 3 of Professor Kofi Agawu's seminal work, Representing African Music. The link to the chapters shall be sent out soon. And for the February 2026 reading session, we are extremely honored and excited to announce that Professor Kofi Agawu himself will be present to lead the reading session, which will focus on chapter 4 of the same text. We also have our second Organ House International Symposium coming up in July 2026. We are pleased to formally announce the call for papers for the second Organ House International Symposium. We strongly encourage you to submit your well-researched papers aligned with the topic areas detailed on the symposium flyer. The symposium flyers will be shared both on the chat box on our screen and also from all our contacts. Deadline for submission of abstract is February 10, 2026, and notification of acceptance will be sent out on the 15th of March, 2026. The symposium promises to be a significant event in the scholarly calendar, and we look forward to receiving your contributions. All inquiries should be directed to our mail address at organhouseseminarseries@gmail.com. Thank you very much. With those announcements in place, let us now turn our attention to the main focus for today. Today's presentation addresses a fundamental question in African art music scholarship. How do African art music generate a distinct musical identity beyond simply borrowing traditional melodies or rhythms? Our presenter argues that the answer lies in the conceptual aim of naming within Yoruba culture, where a name serves as a conceptual map. Today's presentation uses Akin Euba's piano composition, Igbá Kerin, Àwon Àbàmì Eye, to demonstrate this. The presenter, through his work, ultimately proposes that titling acts as a crucial tuning device within an African aesthetic, guiding us to the work's structural and expressive logic. Now, we welcome our presenter. Sunday Olúwaseun Ukaewen is a music theorist and PhD candidate in music and African American studies at Harvard University. His research explores African art music, tonal imagination, and the conceptual systems that shape musical meaning in Yoruba and West African traditions. His current research examines pitch as a dynamic, embodied process in Yoruba dundun drumming, proposing that the numerical pitch shaping practices of performance function as a semiotic logic in their own right. Ukaewen's work sits at the intersection of music theory, ethnomusicology, and African sound philosophy. He has taught and presented widely on African rhythmic and tonal systems, conceptual structural analysis, popular music, and global music theory. And he also serves as a conductor, organist, and mentor to emerging scholars. Please welcome Mr. Sunday Olúwaseun Ukaewen. Hello, Mr. Sunday. Good afternoon. How are you today?
Can you hear me? I can't complain. Uh, how are you too, Mr. Obalade?
I am
Good to see
fine.
you.
Thank you. Good
And
to
thank
see
you
you.
for
You're
your
welcome.
generous introduction.
Thank you for coming to share with us your work today. Now, we'll go right on to the presentation. You can begin.
I can, yeah. Well, good day, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And thank you for joining my presentation. I I want to especially thank Dr. Oladele for inviting me to share my work. I'm equally grateful to the management of the Mountaintop organ house seminar and concert series for hosting me. My first encounter with Akin Euba's Igbá Kerin, Àwon Àbàmì Eye, was not through the score, but through the audio recording by William Chapman Yao. Yao has recorded and curated a remarkable anthology of African and African diasporic piano works, and this piece was one that immediately caught my ear. So I'm going to play it. But when I later opened this call, as you can see on the screen, that's the three bars of the score. We'll see other part of the score later. The sheet music, when I opened the sheet music, I was taken aback. What I saw on the page did not match what I had heard. To put it plainly, I could not reconcile my oral and visual experience. Two things struck me immediately. On the one hand, what I heard felt tonal, grounded in something familiar, as you can, perceive from the music we just heard. On the other hand, what I saw on the score looked atonal, even fragmented. And I remember, you know, thinking to myself, perhaps the problem wasn't the music. Perhaps the problem was the way I was trying to understand it. However, I should mention that this kind of problem is not unique to Yuba's music. Many 20th century composers wrote works in which what we hear disconnects from what we see. Igbá Kerin, Àwon Àbàmì Eye operates within this lineage. Um, its speech materials form an unordered 12-tone fugue, similar in spirit to the modal chromaticism we find in Bela Bartok and other 20th century modernists. It is not surprising then that Nketiah once described Yuba as a follower of Bartok. But it is precisely from within this modernist context that I want to shift our attention away from surface chromaticism toward Yuba's deeper strategy of tonal centering. And from this perspective, I will explore how the piece portrays a centric rivalry between A and F sharp, and how the title itself, the fourth calabash, the supernatural birds, helps illuminate the tonal world Yuba is trying to paint. So in what follows, we will go through the tonal world of the Igbá Kerin and Àwon Àbàmì Eye step by step. I'll begin with what I call allusive polytonality, the sense that the music suggests several possible centers at once, which helps explain why my hair could not immediately locate a single home. From there, I will introduce 20th century tone framework, drawing on Paolo Susani and Elliot and Picoles to give us a more precise language for thinking about tonal centers in 20th century music. With that in place, I will show how A emerges as the primary center of the work, and then turn to the secondary, or what I call rivalry center, F sharp, which shapes much of the piece expressive tension. After that, I will discuss the importance of the title Igbá Kerin, Àwon Àbàmì Eye to the piece, serving as a conceptual lens. And through that, we'll see how the imagery of the calabash and the supernatural verse animates this tonal rivalry. I will end with a brief conclusion and then open the floor for conversation. When we first look at the score, the music immediately suggests more than one possible tonal center. Throughout this presentation, I will be using the word tonal not in the traditional functional tonal sense, but in a 20th century context in which even a single pitch can claim centric power through its behavior, most importantly through assertion, recurrence, and repetition. This distinction will become clearer as we progress. In the right hand, we see an F sharp minor seventh chord. If we separate these pitches into familiar triadic groupings, we find both A major, A C sharp E, and F sharp minor, F sharp A C sharp, embedded in the same sonority. Already, through assertion, we have two potential centers, A and F sharp. The left hand complicates things further. It outlines a G sharp chord without its third. However, the leading tone exchange between G sharp and G natural, as we can see in measure 5, suggests a dominant to tonic resolution on G sharp. So within just a few measures, the score presents A, F sharp, and G sharp as possible gravitational points. Now, if we listen carefully to how these pitches relate, both the left hand and the right hand, another center begins to suggest itself. The G sharp and F and D sharp in the left hand appear just before the F sharp minus 7 sonority in the right hand. In traditional tonal thinking, D sharp tends to lead to E and G sharp tends to lead to A. This leading tone exchange, particularly between D sharp and E, creates a momentary pull toward E, not as a structural center, but as a perceptual one. When we take them together, these overlapping centric hints create what we could call polytonal field. This explains why, my first encounter with the music felt both tonal and atonal at the same time. Our ears trained to search for a single center, struggle to consolidate these competing signals. And this is what makes Igbá Kerin Àwon Àbàmì Eye so intriguing. So intriguing at first and at first sight and sound. But despite this surface level multiplicity, I will argue that the piece, in fact, is tonal and that the perceived polytonality is elusive rather than structural. To demonstrate this, we now turn to the 20th century framework for centering developed by Paolo Susani and Elliot Antokoles. So as not to bore you with my excessive theoretical detail, I will highlight some of the propositions from these authors that illuminate my understanding of Euba's piece, pointing our attention to the relevant places in the score to show how they support the centric authority of A. First, they state that if a piece is based on a mode, such as D Dorian or B flat pentatonic, its modal center corresponds to the modal tonic, that is, the first degree of the mode. This principle allows us to identify tonal centers even in musical contexts that deviate from diatonic tonality. When I speak of modal arrangement, I simply mean scalar arrangement. And I'm staying with modes here because Yuba's speech materials are themselves modal. If we extract and reorder the pitch materials implied by the F sharp minor 7 in the right hand and the G sharp chord minus its third in the left hand, we obtain A, C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, and G sharp. This scale outlines an A Lydian mode, though without the supertonic B. I should quickly mention that B surfaces later, particularly in measure 6, 8, and later, and the later part, as part of the cadential gesture. In other words, according to the arrangement, A emerges as center. Second, they argue for the possibility of bimodal or polytonal combinations, contexts in which two or more modes are used simultaneously. If two modes share the same tonic, for example, D Dorian and D Phrygian, their combination preserves D as the modal center. But if the combined modes have different tonics, for example, D Dorian and E Phrygian, one must evaluate their relevance within the broader musical context. If the modes are independent and no single center dominates, then we must recognize two separate modal centers. Crucially, they add that if one mode is heard predominantly, its tonic becomes the primary modal center. This, this second proposition becomes useful in analyzing the interplay between A Lydian and B flat Ionian that evolves from measure 4 with its pitch member F surfacing earlier in measure 3. The priority center between A and B flat will become clear later. So let's proceed to the third proposition for now. The author identifies several mechanisms for establishing centricity beyond scalar organization. Among them are ostinato chords and registrally isolated pedal points, both of which can anchor the overall texture of a fixed element that acts as a tonal center. This technique parallels pedal point usage in traditional tonal music, where a sustained pitch or recurring harmonic structure appears at structurally significant junctures, very much like cadences. Euba employs this strategy with remarkable clarity. He consistently marks the formal boundaries with a gestured cadence, as shown in the excerpt. We have a B natural supported by G sharp in the left hand, resolving to A. B is doing upward resolution, and G sharp downward, oscillating out. This occurs in measures 8 to 9, marking the end of the first section, and again in measures 27 to 28, marking the end of the piece. These cadences help delineate the overall form and suggest A as a tonal anchor. I should quickly mention that there is more to these boundaries, and this is pertinently one of the questions we must attend to in this analytical adventure. Considering these cadential markings, particularly in how they announce A as the priority center, the piece can be understood, broadly speaking, to have a ternary form, A, B, and the return of A with a little variation. Euba supports this sectionalization with subtle rhythmic variation. An A section in measures 1 to 9, a contrasting B section in measures 10 to 18, and a varied return of A from measures 19 to 28. Let's take a listen. Susani and Anticoles also emphasize contextual cues, metric placement, the completion of recurring pitch sets, and so forth, as indicators of structural articulation. One especially compelling to the author is inversional symmetry. In this technique, pitches are arranged symmetrically around an axis, like we have in mathematics, the x-axis or y-axis. But in this case, it's x-axis, as we will see later, which then functions as a tonal fulcrum. This, since pitch materials of the competing centers we identified earlier are contained within A Lydian, the real contestation considering the role of the scale is now between A of A Lydian and B flat of B flat Ionian. As the chart shows, A functions as the axis of symmetry for both, flanked by materials that evoke A Lydian above and B flat Ionian below. According to Susani and Antiquales, when one axis dominates, the music temporarily resides in that tonal center. The shift from one axis to another operates much like modulation in traditional tonal music. Thus, although Yuba frequently combines both axes within the same musical space, we can see that when one axis asserts itself, the music leans toward that center, at least momentarily. My analytical goal, however, is not to merely catalog these centers. Rather, it is to explore how A, as a priority center, engages in an extended centric rivalry with its relative minor, F sharp, a conflict we will now turn to unpack. Though we have earlier traced its conceptual presence, the recurrence of F sharp at key cadential moments transforms it from a background contrast into a structural force, perhaps even a covered tonal whole. This rivalry between A and F sharp shows most vividly in measures 9 and 28, which mark the most significant cadential gestures in the composition. Though nearly identical, these cadences differ subtly in voicing and tempo. What is most important, however, is the cadential resolution from B natural to A, affirming yet again A's centrality. But immediately after the B resolves to A, the line quickly slips to F sharp, undermining the centric power of A. F sharp, I argue, provides an alternate route, an aura detour that momentarily draws the listener away from A's gravitational pull. This ambiguity is not a compositional accident. It is integral to the work's design. The recurrence of this cadential ambiguity at parallel formal junctures suggests a deliberate structural and expressive intent. As these cadences unambiguously affirmed A, the work might convey tonal stability. Instead, F sharp persists, quietly undermining A's sovereignty and drawing the listener, myself included, into a world where tonal centers are always negotiated. These structural tensions invite us to listen beyond the notes themselves, prompting interpretive questions about how tonal ambiguity might reflect broader aesthetics or philosophical commitments. There are also, I will argue further, cultural resonances embedded in this rivalry. Perhaps the friction between A and F sharp speaks to multiple ways of hearing, to tensions between global and local tonal grammars, or even to Yuba's negotiation of identity across musical systems. Rather than reaffirming a singular logic of tonal finality, the piece opens a polycentric field, a sonic landscape where competing tonal forces coexist, assert themselves, and more importantly, resist domination. Since Yuba deliberately leaves this rivalry unresolved, I ask, what does it imply about the listener's role in constructing meaning? Even, even if we accept A and F sharp as rivalry centers, what kind of rivalry is it? Are they truly struggling for dominance, or are they operating as coexisting centers, neither eclipsing the other? To put it another way, what does contested centricity mean for the piece? More personally, as it concerns us in this presentation today, what does it mean to synthesize hearing and seeing, to inhabit a musical space where tonal meaning is always imagined? In thinking about this set of questions, we now turn to what I call the visual chord embedded in the title, Igbá Kerin, Àwon Àbàmì Eye, the fourth calabash, the supernatural birth, or perhaps it is better described as a visual discord, a metaphoric clash between a metaphoric clash that lodges itself in my mind, asking to be heard alongside the tonal tension in the music. This chord discord duality mirrors the unresolved tonal conflict embedded in the music itself. Unsurprisingly, Yuba translated the title into English to make it more accessible. However, beyond translation, the metaphorical weight of the title reveals a fundamental structural tension, most notably the dichotomy between the calabash and the supernatural birds. This opposition provides an insightful lens through which to understand the unresolved tonal rivalry in the piece. Just as the calabash symbolizes containment and group grounding, A serves as a tonal reference point within the music. Conversely, the supernatural birds evoke escape, movement, and resistance, much like F sharp continually disrupts the stability of A at those cadential points. The calabash, though a container, is not a natural home for any bird. It is not a cage in the sense of an enclosed structure designed to house them. Yet Yuba's title brings these two conceptually opposing elements into conversation, much like it brings A and F sharp into constant negotiation within the piece. Suppose we imagine the calabash as a potential home. The key question becomes, how might the birds survive within it? Yuba offers no clue as to whether the calabash is perforated or breathable. But if we take the idea of supernatural births seriously, the calabash does not need perforation. Its interior is a symbolic, not physical, space where one not physical space, one where only supernatural beings can exist. It is therefore understandable that these birds refuse containment, having experienced freedom and, importantly, the comfort the outside world affords. This contention between the calabash and the supernatural birds reflects the tonal struggle between A and F sharp in the piece. F sharp is not merely a passing dissonance. It is an assertive tonal force that continually resists resolution to A. This resistance to containment is most dramatically expressed in the final measures of the piece, where the anticipated resolution to A never materializes, even with the indication that the music is ending. Instead, the music settles on a gestural F sharp in measure 28, confirming its defiant role in the tonal landscape. This moment is more than a refusal to resolve. It is an enactment of the struggle itself, just as the supernatural birds refuse to be recaptured within the calabash. F sharp refuses to be contained within A's tonosphere. The opposition between A and F sharp is not merely a feature of the piece polytonal environment, it is its defining structural principle. My analysis of Igbá Kerin and Àwon Àbàmì Eye shows that its tonal rivalry between A and F sharp cannot be fully understood through technical analysis alone. As we have seen, modal inversions, cyclic intervallic structures, and cadential gestures reveal how the piece organizes its tonal world, and while analytical listening remains a subjective art shaped by perception and expectation, technical analysis cannot by itself answer the deeper question of Eminenwi, what is he saying, to borrow Olusoji's term. In the spirit of American philosopher John Dewey, we might say that to understand and appreciate an artwork fully, we must attend not only to its structure, but also to the ideas and cultural theories that bring it into being. Just as knowing the ingredients of a meal can deepen our appreciation of its flavor, so too must we grasp the conceptual system from which the work arises. And the theory that produces African art music is not solely Western, as our analytical habits often assume, but a synthesis of African and Western conceptual resources. This is where my conceptual structural framework becomes essential. By placing Yuba's structural devices in dialogue with the contextual text of the title, we see that the rivalry between A and F sharp is not only technical, but more importantly expressive. The calabash anchors and contains, while the supernatural bursts resist and escape. The title is therefore not supplemental, but analytically necessary. It reveals the expressive logic behind the tonal rivalry in ways the score alone cannot. More broadly, this approach offers a method for understanding African art music, or African pianism if you like, a tradition shaped by multiple musical civilizations. Rather than analyzing its structural and cultural dimensions separately, I propose that we read them together. When we allow African conceptual worlds to illuminate structural designs, works like Igbá Kerin and Àwon Àbàmì Eye become legible not as pauses, but as rich negotiations of meaning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ukaewen, for this insightful and beautiful presentation. Before we go on to the question and answer section, we would like again to make a few announcements for those who came in before after we have made the formal announcements. Today is the last episode of the Organized Concert and Seminar Series for the year 2025. We will be going on a short break for the rest of the year, and we shall resume by God's grace in January 2026. We would have our first meeting of the year on January 8th, 2026, with a dedicated reading section where we'll focus on chapters 2 and 3 of Kofi Agawu's seminal work, representing African music. The link to these chapters shall be sent out soon. We also invite all our colleagues, senior colleagues, scholars across the global space to send in their papers for our second Organhouse International Symposium, scheduled for July 2026. We encourage you strongly to submit your well-researched papers aligned with the topic areas detailed on the symposium flyers shown on the screen. Deadline for submission of abstract is February 10th, 2026, and notification of acceptance will be sent out on the 15th of March, 2026. The symposium promises to be a significant event, and we look forward to receiving your contributions. All inquiries should be directed to our mail address at organhouseseminarseries@gmail.com. And for our reading session in February 2026, we are extremely honored and excited to announce that Professor Kofi Agau himself will be present to lead the reading session, which will focus on chapter 4 of the same text. Thank you very much. We hope to welcome you again in 2026. We'll be happy to see you and see more of you with us. Thank you for joining us once again. So right now we will be going to the question and answer section. Mr. Ukaewen has done a beautiful work with this presentation, and I would like us all to engage with our questions and our contributions. Please, if you have questions, kindly raise your hand in the chat box and we'll call on you. Before then, I have a question. To explore Mr. Sunday. Hello, Mr. Sunday, are you there?
Yeah, I'm with you. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much again for your beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
But I am wondering, this work has brilliantly showed how naming functions as a conceptual map in Yuba space. Do you see this concept of titling as a tuning device being applicable across African diaspora? Or is there something uniquely specific to the Yoruba aesthetic framework that makes this method particularly potent to Yuba alone or to the Yoruba culture alone?
Okay, so I mean, I will speak for Yoruba for now because that's what I'm working on and what I'm more familiar with. Uh, in Yoruba, there's a proverb that says, "Ilé là á wò ká tó sọmọ lórúkọ." So, which means Yoruba doesn't just name someone, right? Even nickname in Yoruba culture is not just, a plaything like you have in other cultures. So naming system, it's to me, it constitutes. I mean, so sometimes they even go and try to, um, divine before naming a particular child. Um, so, which means that naming is important to the Yoruba, and whatever name they are giving anyone, it's part of our culture, and we do it even naturally most times. So if you see compositions, apart from Akin Euba, even Akin Euba did many compositions. One question we have not asked the this piece. I'm going to mention other compositions that I've found such the same framework or that I'm using the same framework for, and these are popular compositions that we are familiar with. Uh, um, for instance, if you look at Iya, I think on this seminar series, I've argued for the positional, the understanding of Iya through the Dundun ensemble, right? So the relationship between the notes, and I mean we can talk about that later. I've also this piece by Amojola, uh, what's the title again? The I forgot. If I remember, I will tell you. But there are many pieces that Adura Fun Alafia, for instance, it's also there. So when this pieces to me is not now. I know we can say that. Oh, we can look at the. I'm not talking about even in vocal music. I'm not talking about not necessarily talking about the text of the music, like the lyrics. I'm talking about the structure of the piece and how the composers conceive the structure. And I mean, many times through the name. Uh, I've also listened to the Dr. Ayo Oluranti's Inoran that he composed for some ensemble, a particular ensemble in Germany. I mean, if you listen to the music, you understand that what's the concept of Inoran in the music. If you analyze the pitches and you don't engage it through the lens of Inoran, then you are missing the point. So that's to me the title, for instance. I mean, and then I'm not saying that the title is the only thing. There are many other cultural things in composition, but we can take that as a point of departure to exploring other uh, concepts that the African concept that are in the African art music compositions. So my primary argument, of course, is that we've tried as much as possible to engage African art music from the Western lens alone without, I mean, and then ignoring the Africanness in it. So we are thinking about Africanness as maybe the idioms that we borrow from the traditional music most times, or even the structure. But then we ignore the concepts that animate the structure, even in the traditional music. So we ignore the structure. I mean, the concept. We borrow the structure. We borrow the idioms. So that's what I'm talking about. That in engaging African art music, we need to also engage the concepts that birth the music. Right.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. But do you believe that it is possible, or do you believe it is impossible for someone who, for instance, have no idea of the Yoruba language to pick up this piece and still perform it with this kind of understanding, even without understanding the Yoruba language, not knowing what the topic is about, but just the pieces and the intricacies of the piece to explain it and then be able to explore these hidden meanings that you have talked about today. Is it possible?
Yeah, I would say it's not impossible because performers to do research, and it's their job to research into the composer's intention. Right, in the way of researching into composer's intention is to understand every bit of it. And so many times I ask myself that why is it that we always ignore the title in when we're trying to understand a particular piece? For instance, in the West, if they want to understand Beethoven's Eroica, there's no way they won't refer to the Eroica itself and the history behind it. If you play the music without understanding the history behind it, you miss the point, right? Even though they don't really care about title or naming, they just name things. It doesn't work the way Yoruba naming works, right? But the point is that if you're a performer, right, you should do your own research too into the culture of the music you are trying to perform. But we cannot box anybody. We can tell people how to perform, but I think it's necessary, and that's what Dewey is saying. The way he's saying that you have to understand the theory that births an artwork, to really to fully appreciate uh, the work.
Thank you very much. So, on a lighter note, do you can we say that A won this battle, or that A actually was in a rivalry with a younger bird or a younger entity? Because you mentioned that Yuba left the rivalry unresolved, and
Yes.
that A was the tonal center. So
Hmm.
if A was dominant and then F sharp just kept coming in, and also from the Western scale hierarchy, we know that the A major and F sharp minor thing gives some kind of leadership role, position, or power
Yes.
to A
Yes.
major. So can we
Yes.
say that A won this battle?
Well, if we consider where it ended, I don't think so. Because it's quite funny, right? But if like the English people will say that the ends justify the means. If that is truly the case, then I don't think A won the battle.
All right. Thank you very much once again. And
Thank you.
I'm still calling on our colleagues to please. Um, all right. We
Let's
have Mr. Gbenga Falano. Please, Mr. Falano, can you unmute and ask your question?
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sunday. This is awesome. This is beautiful. My question, I probably joined a little bit late, so I don't know if my question um be will sound off track, but I think it should be relevant also. And it's also kind of tied to the question the facilitator just asked. But I would like to know if you have recommendation for non-African listeners. I don't know if, because I think your response to the facilitator in terms of understanding the Yoruba culture in order to fully comprehend the title itself, especially as performers. So, but I'm tilting my question to listeners now. Listeners, maybe people who come to the concerts and then they see the title and then they hear the music. Maybe not, they are not too vast technically like the performer. How do you think, or what recommendation do you have for listeners to quickly comprehend the title and just oppose it with the Yoruba culture, or probably your work is more focused on the performers? So I don't know if I missed that in the beginning of the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you very much, Benga, for your question. And I think I mentioned that too a little bit in my conclusion. Now, listening is subjective, and you can't box people now to listen to a thing, right? And you can listen to a music today, you feel somehow, and tomorrow you feel another way. So, and the music itself doesn't have one meaning. And so I don't think I'm raising that. Um, but the point I'm trying to raise here is that we should, move away from the structural thing alone when we understand the structural thing, and then also try to combine the conceptual thinking of the Yoruba, naming, right? So that doesn't mean that if anybody hears music tomorrow, they won't enjoy it. So you can enjoy it, but if you truly want to appreciate the music, you must, to me, you must understand the theories that give birth to the music. That's the point I'm trying to raise. But to say that we have to, box people in the way they listen, I don't think that is possible. Because even if you understand what birth the music, what give birth to the music, the theory, right, you can also listen to it in another way. So listening is subjective. It's not something that we can say, oh, this is the way to do it. This is the way to do it. But we can always try in concerts when we are performing all these works to include these theories in our program notes. The West do that a lot, you know. So program note is also a way to, express all these things that we are talking about, uh, or that I talked about in this presentation.
Yes, thank you very much. I can relate to that. I remember hosting a concert sometimes in 2019, and because it's primarily an instrumental concert, and many people, of course, do not even understand. this kind of music in our local setting. So for every piece, I had to put up a storyline that, this piece, it's about a father who had traveled and is just back, and the children come out to welcome him and all of that, so that people look for something that relates with what they have heard, the story they have heard, and then it makes the music more interesting to them to listen, to understand, and to enjoy. So
Yes.
I believe that's a very good way of making our people immersing our people into the music that we are performing. I mean the audience. So Mr. Ayobami Eko, your answer, or please unmute yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma. I don't know if I'm audible.
Yes,
Yes, very well.
Okay. All right. Actually, Mr. Ukaewen has answered my questions in a way in his response to other people's questions, but I would like him to hear my voice also.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm just going to. I heard you say that the West does not really care about title. I don't think that is accurate because even there are musicologists now that analyze that analyzes the music of the West, and still have to reflect on the title and even instrumental, because my curiosity in this title is because this piece is not choral. We cannot hear. There's no lyrics. I was wondering how exactly do you know what the tension is about, and who is fighting and all that. So, well, at least you've been able to do justice, even though I still have reservations, because I think that yes, I don't know if my question is popping up now. I think that there's also a place of the composers. Unfortunately, Akin Euba is not here to come and react to what you have said about his work. But there's also a place of where the composer has to say that okay, this is what I'm trying to do and all that. Because Beethoven's work, for example, Foreigners, a lot of people have interpreted it severally, and well, I for one pick the one that I think I agree with. People saying that okay, the title itself is for Elise. Somebody is Elise. Who is Elise? The question is, historians have been trying to research who Elise is, and trying to say that the first section is longing for Elise, second one is reflecting on the good memories they had, and so on. So yeah, then you said theories that back the music, that listening is subjective. Yeah, that's one of the answers to my question. That listening is subjective. So the way people listen to a piece of music differs. So now these theories that back the music, still part of my question. You mentioned that people really need to understand the theories about the music, while maybe as a performer you want to perform the work, you should. So how do you know? Because it's not always explicitly written somewhere that this is a theory. So in your work today, sir, you've been able to, take us through what you have understand, what you understand to be the theory that bed this music about. Even that is it not subjective. Yeah. So then lastly, he said the host helped us to ask that question already. That is it possible for a non-Yoruba performer to understand the music? And you said it's not impossible. I agree. But if this music is going to be really understood the way you have explained it, I doubt if any Yoruba person will be able to understand, given that Akin Euba never wrote it anywhere. That this is what the music is trying to do. So this is actually the things going on in my head. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Eko, first of all, for joining the presentation. It's good to hear your voice. So, I mean, first of all, when I was talking about titling, I was talking about naming, and I think I emphasized that a lot. In the West, I don't see, maybe if you point my attention to one, that they think through name, they understand a piece through name. even the eroica that I mentioned, it's not through the name. They just go and recite the history, right? So in the Yoruba, for instance, the concept of Igbá in Yoruba is mostly, I mean, from the movies that we watch and what we've had, is they do it in the palace, that they will ask the kings to open one, two, three, four Igbas, or to open one out of many Igbas, you know, and then the one he picks becomes whatever thing that happens during his tenure as a king, right? So that's on the one side. Now, so naming, just to quickly clarify that thing, naming thing, understanding music through the name, it's not, to me, it's not a Western thing, because Western can give any name to any music. But what I'm arguing is that Yoruba composer that I have seen, some people may do it, they don't just give names to pieces, right? They think through many things. And what are those things that they think through when they are trying to give name to the piece? Just like we name our children, you know. So that's the way I think the distinctions between them. And that's our own worldview as Yoruba. Then the point that how do we understand what Yuba is saying? Well, I don't think uh, that's to me, it's not a compulsory thing, right? It's not, compulsory or mandatory that we have to understand Yuba's mind. So I mean, the way he thinks about it, because himself is trying to create something. It's the work of the analyst to find out, and that's what I have done this morning, right? So, and to push it further, from also what I have done is to then, if anybody is now performing the music, I expect them to engage what we have done and use it to write their program note, to understand their program note. So, and then there's no one meaning to any music. If that is the case, nobody will analyze this music again. Somebody will pick it tomorrow and do another thing to it. But what I have presented here is to, you know, table the fact in the music. So that's why I started from what is known, what is common, the technical part of it, how it's layered, you know. And I didn't ask Yuba. I mean, there are theories to do that in the West, right? Then after that, to then say that, well, this music is not a Western music alone, it's also Western music. We have to agree to that. But it's not entirely Western music, it's also African music. And then my curiosity, because the most important thing in analysis, analytical thinking is curiosity. I'm just being curious, you know. Let's say, okay, what is African in this music? And it took me back to the beginning to look at the title and then look at the whole thing that I've gotten from the pitch relationships in the music. And so if you see the evidences I presented, I mean, to me, there's a struggle between the F sharp and A, you know. Um, yeah, I don't know if I answer your question very well, Eko.
Very well, sir. So I've just deduced that just as there is that just that the listening is subjective, uh, also trying to understand or get the meaning of the piece through the theories is also still subjective. And what you have done is to bring out the African meaning in this piece, if I get you correctly, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eko, for the question. And thank you, Mr. Sunday, for answering so explicitly. All right, we have Sheyi Ajibade online. Please, you're welcome.
Yeah. Good morning, Mr. Shem. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if this is a question or maybe just echoing some of the things you said, but I was just interested while I was listening to you. I mean, I joined in the middle. I kind of remembered Fantasy on the Name of Bach. It's a fugue, actually, fugue on the Name of Bach, where the name goes B flat, A, C, and H in German would be B. So do, ti, re, di kind of thing. So that picked my mind immediately. So I was thinking about name being a fixed idea, like naming is actually like I mean, is it fixed? It's probably not fixed, or it could be fixed. It depends on who is fixing it, or is it descriptive or metaphorical? Because and then brings the idea of power imbalance or power dynamics and performance. I think one thing you've been able to do that I think I've picked is you trying to bring the composer's identity and their cultural background into the music, because the back I just described, for example, now, if someone who is trained in a different, I mean, they will play what is written, but I think what cultural logic or what presentation, what performance aesthetic they put to it, how they approach the back or how they interpret it, is also depends on what the person understands as fugue and interpretation of fugue. So I think performance then becomes negotiated based on, and meanings become meanings and new meanings are being asserted to like performances. So, but I think what you're saying is that the naming is just one aspect that helps us to like, understand the music, and whoever performs it, whether white person, black person, I think then that becomes something that we are, then the negotiation begins on the stage, or yeah. um but if someone who is where I have, maybe this is where my question might come in, is if, I mean, I want to compose the music of Igbo music. I'm a Yoruba person, and because I know the phrase, maybe the name is Ife, for example, and let's say not Ife. Let's say an Igbo person wants to write a music called Ife.
If you're
If you're right, yeah, then I decide to like put the just use the name, and then I understand what Ifeoma means, but how do if I don't get the deep meanings of what Ifeoma means, I might not be able to culturally adopt what the name means. Um, in African art music and in your own argument, where do you place such kind of composer? Do you say they are representing the music, or they have they are not representing the music because they did not assign the cultural logics in the music, or is it because they are not Igbos, so they have misrepresented the music? So, or do you say, oh, African art music anyway, it's Western music, it's also African music, it's all together. So I think everyone should be free to do whatever they want to do with the music. Let's forget about some nuances that are not necessarily, I mean, anyway, the music is not actually cultural, it's transcultural and intercultural. It depends on how you see it. So where do you place the cultural, and where do you, detach the cultural from the music and say, okay, I think there should be an open mind to this. Does the name still matters, or does the culture still matters when you're trying to like negotiate these things among different species? Yeah, sorry, it's getting too long.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a beautiful question. I will just attend to the question. So the question I will put to you is, do you think composers don't do research before they compose? They just, wake up and then start composing on the thing. So I'm not talking about those kind of composers. I'm talking about composers who do research. We've seen our great composers, for instance, Baba Olaniyan composed Igbo music. It's Yoruba, late Professor Olaniyan, and other composers. So what they do, even Dr. Olurati, who is very much with us, they research whatever thing they want to use, the materials. They don't just pick up materials and write something, right? So the process of researching is the process of knowing beyond the everyday thing that you hear. If somebody is bearing Ifeoma, if a composer wants to use Ifeoma, for instance, as a framework for his composition, right, or our composition, such composer, I believe, will research into what Ifeoma means, right? So the composer wouldn't just pick Ifeoma and then write it and then use it, maybe the tones and all that. I don't think I'm not talking to such composers, But what I'm talking about are composers who I think research the materials before composing. So if we think, if we agree on that, then I don't think the process of knowing a thing will be difficult, because that's the where the tool of research comes handy.
Thank you
So
very much.
yeah, I mean, just quickly, short note. Now, it doesn't mean, what we are saying here doesn't mean that people cannot do things the way they want to, right? I mean, that's not the point. You can do whatever thing you want to do if you are a composer or whatever, you know. But the point we are trying to raise is not even about the composer. It's about analysts or listeners, analytical listeners, you know, who will say, okay, what is this music actually saying, and how should we understand it better? Right.
Yes. Thank you very much. I believe you have answered this question. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have
Professor Damola has been raising up his hand
yes, we
since.
have Professor Daramola. Please unmute, sir. Hello, sir. Professor Daramola. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, good morning, as it may be everywhere. I'm sorry I joined this conversation a little bit late. Today is the beginning of our convocation, and I also joined that convocation online. Let me start by appreciating Sunday for this beautiful presentation. I was not expecting anything short of that from you. You have actually approached and addressed this, the title of your presentation, from the perspective of the material, which is very good. If you remember, both in my harmony classes and my African music and Nigerian music classes, I used to emphasize three things. You have picked only one of them, and that is a concept, and that is philosophical. And that's why you have approached this title from the from a philosophical point of view. You know, I've told you that, look, there are three things that are germane in discussing anything from African perspective. It may be composition, it may be anything. And these are concepts, the context. You understand? The content. And I added another one, and that is concord. The relationship between all the three will give you the meaning, and we allow people to appreciate the music. You know, you're looking at this Igbá Kerin and Àwon Àbàmì Eye from the perspective of the materials. And whoever, like you said, that I also agree with you, that whoever wants to perform any African music, especially when it comes to piano pieces like that, must understand the content and the context behind that composition. I also agree with you that anybody can, every composer must be a researcher. You must research into whatever you want to compose. And you also agree that anybody can do composition anyhow. But for composers that do their research very well, they will know that Igbá Kerin and Àwon, you know, they are symbolic. For instance, you mentioned Palace Igbá, that the king will be asked to Shigba. That is Igbá Iwa. The Igbá Kerin now can be also contextualized within the framework of numbers 1, 2, 3. The leader, the second in command, the third in command, and the fourth in command. Like we have in my own university, we have the vice chancellor, that's the Igbá Kerin. We have the deputy vice chancellor academy, which is Igbá Keji. Deputy vice chancellor administration, which I am, Igbá Keta. We have deputy vice chancellor research, innovation, and development, Igbá Kerin. You understand it? So we have to really know from which angle are you addressing this Igbá. And the other one I want to point to you is the issue of Àbàmì Eye. You know, Àbàmì Eye, I don't know what you call it, I can't remember now. But Àbàmì Eye is more of a symbolic name. Every Yoruba word, every Yoruba name is a sentence, it's a complete sentence. Àbàmì Eye is uncommon bird. They are uncommon birds, but Igbá cannot stop them from operating. It's only Odo that can stop them from, because ohun tí Odo bá dé, ó dọ̀run. Ohun tí Igbá, you know, tí Igbá bá dojú dé, àfọ̀, àṣì, tí ò bá ṣe ṣí, àfọ̀. But that's not applicable to Odo. So these are the things that I want you to also weave into your discussion. I know you have approached it from the technical and musical aspect, but there are some other cultural things that are in it that I was expecting you to bring out to support your cause. I really appreciate and I enjoy your presentation, though I joined late, but these are some of the things. If you look at it from those 3 C's or 4 C's that I mentioned, the concept, the content, the context, and of course the concord, the relationship between all those things, you discover that your presentation will be very unique. You know, and like you said, the Igbo people, these are the things they want. They want to know, but we also must give them the best from our own end, either to refute their position or to support it. Thank you, Seun, for giving us this enlightenment.
Thank you, Prof. And by the way, Professor Yomida Amalai is my teacher, you know, always your teacher is always, you know, and that's what he has demonstrated here today. And he was our tonal harmony and chromatic harmony teacher. So, and more importantly, it was my piano teacher and also my supervisor at OAU, Obafemi Awolowo University. So, what he's saying to me is absolutely right. But what I'm doing here is not, if I go into that, I don't think we are going to live here, you know, into what Igbá means in Yoruba culture. You know, that will come in the paper if I will be publishing it. But in presentation, what I wanted to point out, you know, because I've also been following the organelle seminar series and the kind of conversation we are having. I'm just trying to join the conversation. So 2 things I've tried to establish is that on the one hand, we can have the technical analysis, and on the other hand, we can have the conceptual analysis. And conceptual comes from, to my mind, comes from the naming system. The technical analysis can come from the arrangement of the pitches, which the West has, you know, enough theories to understand that. So that's why I borrowed from Paolo Susani and Elliot Anticoles, and also borrowed the ideas to relate what supernatural could mean, and what which I think I did justice to that in my analysis of the Igbá, because that's where I said that Igbá didn't tell us that Igbá is perforated. So then we'll be wondering that how can birds stay in an unperforated Igbá? They will die, right? But then if we consider the supernatural, the Àbàmì thing about the birds, then we will know that the idea of Igbá is just symbolic. You know, the environment is not the one that will kill the supernatural birds. Then I push the argument for that based on the characterization that Euba tried to paint in the music, that perhaps the Àbàmì Eye kind of enjoyed the breeze in the world that we all live in, and then decided not to go back into the Igbá, even though they will not die if they are, you know, if they live, if they are confined in the calabash, right? So that's what I was trying to say. Okay, that when A, which is the primary center, as we have all seen through the analysis, you know, resolves. Why is it that it's eloping into F sharp gesturally? You know, that's the point I'm trying to raise. I thank you very much again, Professor Damola, for your beautiful analysis.
Thank you very much. It's such an interesting time and an interesting conversation this afternoon, and I'm glad I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Sunday, once again for sharing this work with us. Okay, can we have Dr. Ayorinde while Dr. Joseph work on his network.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay. To start with, thanks so much, my brother. Thank you so much, Mr. Sunday. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. Yeah, mine is twofold. The first one is a question, then the other one is perhaps something all of us can take away from here from this presentation. So the first one is your work, the way I understand it now from the presentation and of course initial conversation, is quite divergent in terms of focus. You know, it's like spreading leg everywhere, of course, which is a current trend. We call it transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, whatever everybody can call it. But specifically, I want to, there's a conversation going on, of course, in the last 20 years around musical analysis, music theory, what should we do, composition particularly, central to that conversation on the continent, particularly from the southern part of Nigeria, Southern Africa, then to shooting out to the global north, is a discourse around artistic research. Yeah, in the last, let's say 7, 8, 10 years, I have been I have organized part of a team who organized series of publications, conversation around this discourse, of course. But what you have done reminds me, caught my attention to most of the things we have engaged with other people, from other parts of Africa, which underlies the idea of bringing theory, philosophy, cultural, contextual, and technical analysis into one conversation, particularly in engaging African material. Again, this is different to the notion of composition from what we have seen today. Yeah, it's different to the notion of theory, the way we have it. So what I want to ask you is this. Of course, scholars there's a conversation going on. What, from your perspective, from your own work, my first question is, will you call you this kind of how will you classify your work within this particular context? Of course, there's philosophy, cultural, technical. If anything you find in music theory, the mainstream, you have the cultural analysis, cultural history, everything is there. And this is my opinion, or what underlies the concept of artistic research, particularly in music, So would you say your work belong to this category or this new emerging, in quotes, slogan, or this, this new layer, this new thinking, this new movement? Would you say that? That's number one. Number two is that, can we then would you also suggest for those in composition, music analysis, and theory to also start thinking like this, culturally, contextually, philosophically, when they engage analysis? Let me stop. Let me pause for a while there.
Okay, thank you very much again, Dr. Ayorinde. First of all, just to clarify, what do you mean by artistic research, so that we can be on the same page?
Okay, thank you. So artistic research, of course, is a movement that started in the late 80s. And the basic idea, of course, it is rooted in art, design, architecture, of course, drama, theater, dance. So recently, at least in the last 20 years or 30 years, thereabout, it came into music fully. So you now see people talking about artistic research in music. If you know the works of Georgina Bond, the lives of Georgina Bond, has written a lot of artistic research. And when you move upward into Australia, it's a big deal, it's a big conversation. And what it's doing is that it came as a baby, as a solution, in quote, to mediate discourse around decolonization. Why? So because the decolonization in composition or music theory, because when people talk about music theory, initially what they do is with the mainstream, the 19th century idea of the old thing and composition. But when the idea of the colonial discourse, post-colonial discourse came, people started reworking, rerouting the thinking of analysis through their culture. And I can give you examples, even in Nigerian context, historically, those who have done that. Of course, they have not done analysis. They've composed the likes of that you mentioned, Ayoban Kole. If you check his work, Biofun, and works like a lot of his work, Iya, of course. Then Akin Euba, you have the likes of Uzogwe, and many of these, their generation, what they've done in that sense, what they were doing was a response to the Western hegemony, and this indirectly contributing to discourse around post-colonial theory, decoloniality, and everything. But in the 80s, some scholars sat down and reworked it. Instead of us calling it compositional theory, we want to call it artistic research. And what that means is that it is first of all rooted in context, culture, geography, place, spaces, and bodies before we start talking about theory. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. So, of course, it's popular in South Africa.
So the reason why I was asking the question is because in 2020, during pandemic, when I was in Nigeria, nobody could go out. You just stay in your room. I was frustrated, and in the process of trying to enliven myself, I took a course online on EDX called Artistic Research in Music. Right. So, and what happens, what we do there is what I have done so far, right? And what it means is that if I'm a pianist now and I want to play this music, I look at it the way holistically what is coming out from it, and so trying to dig out the intention of the composers and the conditions around it and everything, and putting that into the performance, right? It also involves into my gesticulation of all these things that I've talked about during my performance. So not necessarily the way they do gesticulation on piano playing now, that is very general. People just gesticulate things how they feel, right? But particularly to what the music is saying. So the pianist, for instance, will research into the music and then try to understand the performance through what the music is saying. Now, so I did that. That's why I wanted to, be clear about what you are trying to say. But there's one word I will borrow from late Professor Sophie Oluwole, who said that, and just to paraphrase, we are not separatists. So she was trying to explain the concept of Ifa. I mentioned the professor's name, and she said that the professor said, Ifa is not philosophy, but contains philosophy. Ifa is not science, but contains science. Ifa is not art, but contains art. Ifa is all-encompassing. And in Yoruba, the way I understand it is when we think about the phenomenon, we think about it from every angle. So our culture is not a separatist culture. It's in the West that you see that, when you talk about, if I want to, for instance, if this paper is to be, if I want to write it in the way the Western will write it, I will hand it where the technical analysis ends and then analyze just the pitch relationships. Now, I wouldn't bother to go into other things, other area, the philosophy or the idea, but our own culture, and that's precisely my argument, that we are not separatists. We are not a culture that, or a people that, separate things, that, this is my left hand should be alone, my right hand should be alone. So in Yoruba culture, the way I understand it is everything all encompassing. And just like Professor Daramala, explains, the idea of concept, context, content, and the one he added later, concord, right? Everything working together, that's the way I see the Yoruba, and that's the way I think about analysis. Even when I'm performing, that's the way I think, even Western music, right? So, but that doesn't mean that we cannot do a technical analysis for technical analysis sake, or we cannot do a philosophical analysis for its sake, right? But the argument I'm putting forward is that we should understand African art music all encompassing, in totality when we are trying to engage it or putting it forward, even to the West. So that's one. Then the idea of decolonization, post-colonization, whatever colonization, I will run away from that. So I will run away from it. So if you are saying, oh, how should we classify what I have done? Then again, I will ask you that how should we classify Ifa? I mean, it's boxing something to me, it's endangering ourselves.
Okay,
Right.
maybe to interrupt a bit, maybe
Right.
we should redirect it a bit. So,
Yeah,
would
right.
you call your work a scholarly work or a pure theoretical or compositional resources or perspective? I'm
What do you
saying all
mean?
this because
What do you
these are
mean by scholarly work?
Yes, thank you. So the point is like we know, of course, you are very familiar to this platform, and I'm asking you this particular question because set of questions because there are things that there are topical issues that recurring issues that we have engaged. We are engaging across board different theories, different composers will come. So we keep there are topical issues that have become discourse layers and materials on this platform. So the point is, we have different school of thoughts, and I'm happy to say this that Organ House is a space of many dynamic, multiple angles. Some people believe that if you are doing composition, you're not a scholar. It should be a scholarly work. Why some people believe that, look, scholarship can also emerge. So you can combine the two. And that's where my question comes. Your work is combining being a theorist and being a musicology and being an African whatever and being a philosopher.
Yes.
Some people have contested that, no, this is just paperwork. Let's do composition. Let's do theory. That is my question. So the question for us is, what you are doing now, will you call it a scholarly musicological work or a pure, or will you rather pitch yourself within the theory family or corner or sect? That's what I'm saying. Or you want to bring it together?
I mean, what would you say Ajayi is doing?
Sorry,
Yes,
please,
sir.
sorry.
Yes, sir.
Let me quickly come. Doctor, I really want to appreciate you for this question. Our training in Ife is all encompassing.
Yes.
Anything, either composition, performance, or anything, we base it on research. And that's why Sean was emphasizing that any composer that does not do research may not get it right. We link it to research. And once it is linked to research, it becomes scholarly work. And that's why he said, if he wants to, that is within the confines of this presentation, is limiting the Organ House is limiting his presentation to what he was doing today. But if he is going to go further to publish it, you had when he said that he's going to work on all these areas because all those areas are very, the Yoruba hegemony is so fantastic, and there's no way you can separate one from the other. So in Ife, our training is all encompassing, and that's what he has demonstrated here. And I think he has presented an academic work, if you like it, or a research work, if you like it, but he's limiting it to, I think, what he was given from the Organ House. The Organ House has been doing fantastically well, but this presentation is not limited to theory, it's not limited to composition alone, and that's why he brought the idea of culture, like you said, Doctor. The idea of culture, the superstructure of the Yoruba, and the structure of the Yoruba. All these things are woven together in his presentation. But where he was not doing enough, I pointed it out that you have to make it clear to your listeners or your readers in the nearest future that this one stands for this, that one stands for that. For instance, what F sharp is to A is also to another tonal center. So these are the things that, is all encompassing, Doctor. So I will allow Seun to also respond to your question.
Okay, my dear Prof, Mr. Seun, wait, you will respond. My dear Prof, thank you so much. I agree with you 100%. I think we are saying the same thing. So my point is not even about the presentation. It's about the value of this kind of presentation and this kind of work. And I've asked those questions to allow Mr. Seun to provide a kind of insight for those that will see this video in the next 10 years, in the next 5 years, scholars who want to do this kind of job. So it's to clear ambiguities. It's to help people understand what this kind of work means. Like Professor have rightly explained, we have this kind of model in Nigeria. Yes, but people don't really understand how to place themselves. Yeah, they don't know how to play themselves. So, and that's why reason perhaps we have Mr. Seun here today, his kind of work. So I have asked those questions to allow him to further unpack. So when people come, we can reference, go and see Mr. Seun's presentation. Then automatically they will get answers, not just one answer. They will get multiple answers to their kind of work. So, Prof, I sincerely appreciate your support for our project and your firm support. Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you, Mr. Seun. Okay.
Okay. I mean, first of all, I will clarify some things. Professor Damola, just to clarify, all the things you mentioned, I did them. Maybe you were not here when I did that. So there are many centers I established. There are many things I established. Then I borrow a theoretical lens from Susani and Antokoles to understand the primary centers among all the centers. I established F sharp, established G sharp, D sharp, E, and others. Right. So, and what I'm trying to do, so the reason why I'm asking Dr. Ayorinde about what scholarly presentation mean, he didn't answer anyways, is I wanted you to define what scholarly presentation mean. And I think the problem we're trying to, the question to me is not, it's not what one can think about. For instance, it's just like you asking me that, oh, who is Sunday? Is Sunday this? Or is Sunday that? Is Sunday? My work is, interdisciplinary. And more importantly, what I do and what I have done today is what they call disciplinary interpolation. So which means is that I'm not looking at the piece from one angle. I'm looking at it. So take it, for instance, to Yoruba cosmology, understand what it means. You take it to Western analytical lens, try to understand what it means. Take it to different angles, try to understand what it means. Right. What I didn't mention is also the politics that Igbá was trying to play in the music. Right. So it's not, you can't say, oh, this is the placement that you're talking about. For instance, maybe the easiest answer I will give you is that you place it in interdisciplinary thinking. But I want to explain, what does analysis itself means? That's the question we should ask ourselves. And we have generalized that so much so that it loses its values. But I attuned myself to Theodore Adorno, who's a Western philosopher, who says that analysis is an act of looking for truth, content within an artwork. And the question is, what is that truth content? He explained many things. I wouldn't want to bore you about what that truth content means, right? So he explained many things. But what is more important, and I also aligned to Agau. And by the way, Agau, that we know, we've read his work on African music, which he wrote so vastly on analysis. right? Be it whatever, Western, African, and we should get hold of those materials. In his word, very simply, he said, analysis is taken apart, understanding the atoms when you take them apart in relation to the whole. So which means when you understand a part of a music, how does it relate to the whole, the entire thing? So what I have demonstrated today is to take apart the pitch materials that Euba used and think through how it relates to the entire worldview of the music itself. And so that may, to me, of course, if people are not familiar with understanding a part and relating it to the whole, and if we don't think through that as what analysis actually means, right? Or as Adorno said, that analysis is an act of looking for truth content, right? So then it becomes a problem when you hear such analysis as this. So what I have done, right, it's not something new, as you have said, but the question is, why do we have to think about saying, oh, how do we, I mean, to return to your question, Dr. Ayorinde, how do you place this kind of presentation? First of all, I am not composing. What I am doing is to think about a composition, both analytically, compositionally, and philosophically. And what I understand about composition is that composers are also philosophers. And I think that's common. We know that.
Thank you so much. On that
Hold on,
note,
let me conclude, please.
Okay, okay.
Hold on. Composition is, composers are also philosophers. By philosopher, I mean, not necessarily they are philosophers with their materials, with their work, right? So what are they saying? And I also reference Olusoji, who was asking in one of his papers that, and that's how we understand things, that what is he saying? So the question of what is he saying cannot be answered, to return to my presentation, with analytical exploration alone, and with technical analytical, let me put it that way, technical analytical exploration alone, but also including the philosophy that birthed the music, which I talked about as conceptual, right? Professor Damola talks about content. Content deals with technical analysis in terms of this particular piece. Context is a piano work. It's African, so-called African pianism or African art music. So I try to maintain the context. And concord, the final one, to analyze Professor Diamola's word, is what I have done. And that's when you're talking about, how do all these ideas relate together, right? So that's what I use the title to animate. After all, the Yoruba says, Ile la ń wò ká tó sọmọ lórúkọ. And they also say that orúkọ ní ròyàn. So what I have done in Yoruba is to ask that, báwo ni orúkọ orin yìí ṣe rò ó? Right. So it's all, bringing everything together. Like I said, taking apart the atom to understand the whole. That's the way it works.
Thank you. So just a point quickly, what I want to ask, just a follow-up. Agawu, there's a statement that Agawu usually makes when he wants to engage broader disciplinary idea around this kind of representation. So Agawu will ask, then who has the ticket to represent who, and how? So then the question for me to you on what you just explained now is that, who has the ticket to talk about composition? Is it just composers or scholars? So in that case, do you mean
who has the ticket?
Yes.
So it's a very simple question you ask, Dr. Ayorinde.
Yeah.
So if you listen truly to my presentation today, I present myself as a listener, right? Which means both analyst, composer, and ordinary layman listener. We are all listeners, right? So the question then is, to rephrase your own question, is who has the ticket to listen to a work?
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mr. Ayo, director, AY director is raising up his hand.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sunday.
Thank you.
Yes. Please, our time is fast spent, so we might not be able to take any more question after this one. I would implore Mr. Ayo to please just make his question very brief because our time is fast.
Okay, thank you very much. This is actually not a question. I just want to probably contribute to the ongoing debate. And then actually, because I've been following some of the can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I've been following some of the debate about artistic research. And then I know that artistic research could also mean creative research, according to Patricia Levy, could also mean art-based research, and then one of the things that we seem to overlook when we talk about artistic research is the artistic part of it. And then we think, oh yeah, everybody goes, oh, it's scholarly, it's this, it's that. But the artistic part of it is that you must first have something artistic that you want to research on. And that's what we call the artifacts. What is it that you want to research on? Do you have your artifacts? How good are you in whatever you're doing? If it is composition, have you studied composition? If it is performance, have you studied performance? That's what any university abroad will do. The first level is, have you studied the how would I put it? Well, you understand, have you really gotten to a stage where you can now do a research based on your work? I think that's where we're getting things mixed up. The artifact, what you are presenting, what you want to do a research on is very important. And then when we start saying, artistic research is this, artistic research is that, according to what Mr. Shion said, some of my own researches are interdisciplinary. It doesn't even stay in just composition. It goes beyond composition. It goes into ethnomusicology. It goes into cultural studies. Like you said, that look, most of these things, especially because we are Africans, we delve into so many other things, cosmology and all the other things. But the first major thing is, do you have what it takes to actually be an artist? Right? So, and I think that's where the misconceptions always come in. Not that artistic people or creative based research people don't think that it is scholarly. Definitely it is scholarly. But as a creative research personnel, how much of your creative endeavor do you know? And that's the first level to start. I think that's where the misconception always come from. So this is just what I said I should contribute to the debate going on. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. AY director.
Thank you very much, Mr. AY. And thank you so much, Mr. Sunday, for sharing your work with us today.
There's a composer raising up his hand, though. I mean, that's Dr. Ayo Oluranti.
Actually, our time is fast spent, so
okay.
we're trying to not take any other question. But
Uncle, please excuse me. Let me beg for Dr. Oluranti. Let's listen to a composer now.
Yes, thank you.
I beg your time.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay, Dr. Oluranti, please. Thank you. Come, you can speak now. Or please make it brief, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry. I mean, the first thing is I should apologize. Basically, it's on the time difference. I joined lately, and the beat I joined got me fired up. On the first thing, I just want to mention something on the issue Dr. Aide brought up, that who has the right over composition and things like that. The truth of the matter is that anybody has the right. Anybody can do anything they want to do.
Yes.
Do you get it? The key thing here, which I suspect Sean has brought on board, is the component of analysis. What is the meaning of analysis to a theorist? What is the meaning of analysis to a musicologist or a musicologist? The tendency for the theorist and composer is to conduct analysis based on the conditions in the music.
Whereas those outside, I mean, that circle, like musicologists and musicologists, they consider analysis around conditions outside the music, focusing on things of theory, culture, gender, politics, and things like that. So anybody can talk about one object from any angle. It's allowed. But the component of analysis that I'm sure that Phil has brought to the fore is the component of musical analysis, which a lot of people run away from, which is tearing apart the music. You've already defined it. And I do understand that because that's the core of composition, tearing things apart to see what it is. So analysis means different things to A, B, C, D. Then finally, this issue of artistic research is sad because Africans will continue to do follow. You see, there's a lot of noise about artistic research. But one thing, like Dr. Adebola said earlier on, so many months ago, is that the West, they come up with solutions. And eventually these solutions, they solve problems that are culture specific. And this is something we don't understand as Africans. The point Ayaja is making about about artistic research is that there must be component, there must be something that you can relate with, you are trained with. And what is this all about? Artistic research is so prominent in Germany, some part of Europe. Do you get it? They are trying to solve a problem. What's the problem? Their pedagogical system, they had, conservatories, which were not doing research. And they had research in the institute. Similar thing in England. And these are things they've been struggling with, which America has solved that problem long time ago, which is why nobody's talking about artistic research in America. Because they've solved it. Now, they are solving that problem. They have a strong pedagogical culture from the elementary level, such that anybody who gets into artistic research in that environment, they're already grounded in composition, in performance, in whether they went to the university or not. So whatever artistic research they do is going to get them to where they want to get to. But in Africa, we don't have that basis. You embrace artistic research, the way they embrace it, the result will be artistic jabberdances. We need to go back to the basis and think and come up with our own solutions. Dr. Olúwaseun threw one article at me by one born, and initially I said I wasn't going to read it. I read it and I said, here we go. These people have come up with a cultural solution. And for us, you want just to embrace it, artistic this. The other time I was at the conference of American Musical Society and Society of Musical Theory. I think Dr. Elisom is here. At some gatherings, I brought up this issue that there's this noise about artistic research. And somebody there, right at the conference, said, what does it even mean? What the heck is that? So for us as Africans, we need to think, and instead of just like we embrace democracy, which has landed us into trouble, these are solutions that are culture specific. We should start thinking. Thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you so much, Dr. Olúwaseun, for this comment. Does the presenter have any reaction to this?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, I think Dr. Olúwaseun and Mr. AY director, they were both on point, and if you think about artistic research, that's what I would think about too. And because, and one thing I've also been thinking about is, nomenclature many times confuse us about what certain things means, right? So, and I think simplifying it to ourselves really matter. And what AY director has done is to say that, and I also said it earlier on, that what composers are also researchers. Even traditional composers are researchers. They research. They don't just, if you pick Ayinde Barrister, for instance, work, it wouldn't just wake up and start singing something. It will research the Quranic verses, all those things. Those are elements of resources from research. So if we think about composition like that, then we'll ask the right questions, when we are thinking analytically.
Thank
So
you very much.
thank you very much again, the host,
Yeah.
Mrs. Temitope Obalade.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who has who has asked one question or the other, or has contributed to today's presentation. We are grateful to have you. Please do join us next year, January 8th, for our reading session, which will be the first meeting for the year 2026. For the rest of this year, we'll be having a break. Thank you so much again for joining us. God bless you. I wish you a very happy holiday. Bye.
Thank you.